Hey guys, I'm back with a new review. Sorry this one's a little later this week because school has started and I just have less time to do things now. But I still should be able to upload at least one review of an episode per week. Every Friday I write the script and I record and I get the screen grabs, and then on Saturday I should be able to upload the review. So now from now on it'll most likely be I upload one episode review every Saturday. So sorry about the inconvenience, but that's the way it's got to be because I got less time now, and so I won't be able to do two like I've been doing for a while now. I'll only be able to do one a week. So I'm sorry about that. That's the way it's got to be. Also, you might hear in the background rain. Again, time. This is the only time I can review, so I apologize for the inconvenience of the rain in the background. Rain seems to factor in a lot into my videos, like the collection review where it got really dark. So, again, sorry about that. But anyway, getting that out of the way, here's a review of The Underdwellers. The Underdwellers is probably one of the most underrated episodes of this series because no one really talks about it, and yet it tells us a lot about Batman's character. This episode focuses on how Batman deals with the young lost souls of Gotham City, which are the Underdwellers, who are ruled by the insidious Sewer King. The opening scene is very disjointed from the events of the rest of the episode, where Batman is watching two adolescents play chicken on the top of a train and is forced to swoop in and save one of them because he is stuck on a wire. The only real connection to this episode in the opening scene is that Batman is interacting with the young people that have been shaped in a way to what they are by Gotham City itself. Batman gets several great lines this episode, the first one being, "You play chicken long enough, you fry." This episode takes its time using the visuals mostly to tell the story unfold, and there are several places with no dialogue and just music as we see the action unfold. Before I get into other things and forget, I want to say that like many of the early episodes, Shirley Walker did an especially great job, and the cinematic music adds so much weight and emotion to the scenes and the situations in this story. This also lets the audience absorb the amazing backgrounds that are incredibly dark and atmospheric, like when Batman is in a dark alley chasing after one of the Underdwellers. The backgrounds also look great in the sewers, where it is very dark even for this show, and the attention to detail is nothing short of amazing, making the sewers look old, dirty, and claustrophobic even. Since so much of the episode is unfolded in a visual way, it's a great help that this episode looks very good, around the animation quality of Pretty Poison. The Underdwellers looks much darker, however, which is appropriate since the Underdwellers is a darker story. Abandoned children have gone to live in the sewers where they are ruled by essentially a tyrant who forces them to work and steal for him all day and providing minimal in return. The Sewer King is voiced by Michael Pataki, who passed away on April 15, 2010, unfortunately. He brings a really exaggerated performance to the Sewer King, who thinks he is the master of the children, but in reality is an ignorant, small-minded man who may have been abandoned at one point in his life as well, though there is no mention of this. Aside from making the children work all the time, the Sewer King forces them to remain quiet, and he treats them like dirt, instead of caring for them like a true guardian. The children's eyes are unaccustomed to light because they have been down in the sewers for so long, and as punishment, the Sewer King locks them in a brightly lit room for a few hours because they misbehaved according to strict rules. An interesting tweak that could have been made to the character is that maybe he could have been a good guardian, and his quarrel could have just been with the society itself, and the children would not want to leave him. This is not a complaint, but just an interesting way to think about a different alternative the episode could have carried out. The point of the episode, the way it is naturally different because the children are being abused, which clearly offends Batman and the audience as well. Going back to how the Sewer King has the children be silent, he says that children should be seen, not heard, quote, which is a horribly skewed way to treat any person in general, and really makes the Sewer King one of the more ethically appalling bad guys in this show. Backtracking to the over-the-top characterization of the Sewer King, it really adds to how morally deluded the Sewer King is, and how he feels he's the children's instructor in a horrible school of slavery. Though in some places I find it more funny than evil. My favorite example is when he seems he's going to perish, and Batman tries to save him by telling him to grab his hand, and the Sewer King just yells, "Never!" I'll get back to the Sewer King and Batman in a little while, but I would like to move on to another important part of the episode, which is Alfred. I didn't think I would be mentioning Alfred for each episode of this review series so far, but when Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. voices him, it's always a treat to see Alfred, and we get to see more of him in this episode than usual, I think. The main thing Alfred does here is look after one of the Underdwellers called Frog, who Batman has brought to Wayne Manor. Though this makes for some very humorous scenes, I don't entirely understand why Batman didn't just ask Frog to lead him to the Sewer King instead of going home first, since we don't see Batman do much figuring things out besides looking at the paper in the Batcave. To be fair, it does seem that Batman knows there's more than one of these kids going around Gotham, and probably wants to find out why they are forming a group and stealing from people. When he uses his infrared lenses to look for a hidden wall, I never realized until watching this episode this time that it makes him look like Batclops, mostly because the lens is red. So it just reminds me a lot of Cyclops. Before Batman goes on patrol to find out more about these leprechaun quote-unquote sightings, he and Alfred have a great discussion about considering taking a vacation like golfing, to which Bruce responds with, "Sounds boring. The Bahamas. Hot and boring." Bruce then says that this looks like a job for Batman, to which Alfred says that Bruce has a fine flair for the dramatic. The scenes in which Alfred is taking care of Frog serve to add comedy to an episode that could get very dark and depressing due to the fact that the episode is dealing basically with child slavery. It is also interesting to look at this episode in relation to the infamous "I've Got Batman in My Basement," since both in large part deal with children. It's kind of ironic, considering the Sewer King's philosophy of children should be seen, not heard, that the episode where the kids actually talk is the obvious worst of the two. But that's not terribly important to either episode, it's just an interesting observation, or over-analyzing. The most interesting and important aspect of this episode is Batman's reactions to the events occurring. I do like that as Batman is looking at Frog stirring up trouble with Alfred, he smiles and is reminded of when he was a kid before his life was changed. My favorite scene is when Frog stumbles into the mansion armory and grabs one of the guns, and Alfred tells him to put it down before he hurts someone. When Batman takes away the gun, which is unloaded, and Batman says a very poignant line, which is, "Children and guns do not mix. Ever." This is a great callback to how a tragedy forever changed Bruce in a similar way as to how the Underdwellers' lives have been changed by being abandoned, as well as Batman's seal of never using a gun, which is an integral part of the character. In the comic Batman Heart of Hush, Scarecrow states that he is especially compassionate toward the young victims of Gotham because he shares a similar origin to them, and while the Sewer King does what the Sewer King does would be appalling to most people, it especially angers Batman to see that Gotham is still a place with not just crime, but also a place where a young Bruce Wayne's parents can be murdered, or at least some type of tragedy. Batman's anger when he sees the state the children are living in says more than words could ever express. The final action sequence is very good with the crocodiles, but I'm not sure how to feel about Batman killing one of the gators, or at least I think he did. Though Batman did seem very determined to stop the Sewer King, and he was pissed off, especially when the Sewer King refers to the kids he uses as slaves as his quote-unquote beloved children. The viewer can definitely feel Batman's determination as he relentlessly chases him through the sewers. The actual apprehension of the Sewer King may be one of Batman's greatest moments ever when defeating a bad guy. He says, "I don't pass sentence. That's for the courts. But this time, I'm sorely tempted to do the job myself." By the way, trains seem to be a common motif this episode, where Batman saves the kid at the beginning on the train, saves Frog before taking him to the Batcave, and saves the Sewer King at the end from train. Though I'm not exactly sure what all this train stuff is supposed to mean. I don't know. At the end, when the children finally see the lights when they go to the surface, they learn to see it as a pleasant and warm feeling rather than their punishment for misbehaving in the Sewer King's rule, which is a nice image to close out on. I would briefly like to reiterate that the episode looks great, and Batman is drawn and shaded in such a way that he looks like he stepped directly out of a very dark and awesome comic book. This episode on the whole, I feel, would make a very cool 3 or 4 or 5 issue story arc. Last review I said I had a personal history with this episode, which I shall explain now. Excuse me. The very first time I was truly exposed to Batman in story form, not just, Batman, seeing him as an icon, just seeing his pictures at Walmart or anything. The first time I was actually exposed to a Batman story was when I bought the Sub-Zero DVD, Batman and Mr. Freeze Sub-Zero, when I was a kid. And the next day, the day after I bought Sub-Zero, I was so, I was loving Batman, so I wanted another Batman DVD. So the next day I bought another Batman DVD, which contained 4 episodes of Batman the Animated Series. The first episode on that disc was The Underdwellers, which effectively makes it the first episode of Batman the Animated Series I've ever seen, and is my earliest exposure to the character. I remember thinking this show was very dark, judging from this early episode. Visually, this is one of the darker episodes of the series, but I may be biased when I say that, considering I saw it as a child, and I was much more easily scared or frightened of darkness. Though the episode itself didn't scare me. It was the equivalent of me watching Spawn the Animated Series today. It's very dark and edgy, but it might feel like a little uneasy watching it, but I can still watch it and not turn the TV or computer off. Wrapping this up, The Underdwellers is not an episode that is spoken much of, but definitely is very good, and is part of the advantage of reviewing this series episode by episode, which is I can talk about episodes that not many people talk about. It's very difficult for me to rate this episode, because 4.5 seems a little too high, a 4 seems a little too low, a 4.25 just sounds weird, or just feels weird. So, considering this is the very first episode of Batman the Animated Series I've ever seen, I'm gonna give The Underdwellers a slightly higher score than I probably would, even though it is a pretty cool episode and very interesting to talk about. So I'm gonna give The Underdwellers a 4.5 out of 5. Thanks for watching, and tune in next time for a review of POV, which is a pretty cool episode. I think it'll be very interesting to do that. So, I'll see you then. Bye.